Welcome to Power of the Tribe podcast. I'm John Connors. I'm your host, and I'm also the founder and head instructor of Connors Martial Arts here in Norwood, Massachusetts. We teach Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, Muay Thai, kickboxing, and mixed martial arts. Come down and see us. We can be your tribe. We can change your life. And hopefully soon, Dan, we'll be doing that again.
Yeah. For now, you can come down and look at the outside of the building.
You can do that. We have a brand new sign. They can see that. They can listen to this podcast. That's the great thing about podcasting. All social distancing. You don't have to get near anybody.
Yeah. And again, we've been deemed essential. So we've been broadcasting throughout. This is week 1 million.
1 million. May
of the
it's
quarantine.
Officially May 20th we're recording
Yeah.
this. Yeah.
So it feels like week 1 million. But, I think last week I said we could see the light at the end of the tunnel. I'm not positive I see the light at the end of the tunnel.
Got a little fuzzier.
It's a little fuzzier. Like, I think not that things are worse, things are going to open up, but it's sort of just really unclear when things are going to open up, what rules are going to be in place, what things are not going to open up. Like, it looks like big events are not going to open up for a while.
Oh, right.
At least to the end of the summer. There's some schools that already announced they're not opening up for the fall. Harvard Medical School.
Really?
And some of the California universities are already said they're closed for the fall.
The last time I looked in Massachusetts, age 0 to 19, there were no deaths. So I would think opening up schools would be a thing you could do.
Yeah, I think so. Of course, they could bring it back to older parents, but then it's like maybe stay away from your older parents and let the kids go to school. Then there's elderly professors, I guess. I don't know. But it seems like they could just stay away from the kids.
Right. Yeah.
Because it's a pretty big thing to, shut down colleges for kids,
What about schools, Dan?
Yeah,
Like
schools, yeah. The high
elementary school, high school?
that's a huge deal, and that's an economic deal, too. Parents have to stay home and watch their kids. So it's not like a little thing. It's not like, what about the danger to elderly people in the house? It's like, I get it, but also it's not a little decision to not open the schools. It's a big, big decision.
Yeah. It would seem like if you quarantine the people at risk.
And we'll see, too. We'll see. My parents were they're in Florida, and they were saying there's no way we can come back at the end of July or end of August. And I was saying, we don't know. What if by the end of July, new cases in Massachusetts are down to almost nothing? That could be. Everyone's sort of losing sight of that. We might eventually get to where new cases have really dropped off the map. So if that happens, that'll give everyone a different perspective. But there's no new cases. You feel a little safer going out.
I don't even look at.
Did you just cough?
I don't even look at the new cases number. No, I have a little something in my throat. I'm fine.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm very healthy. Thank God. Thank God. Yeah. I look at the website Massachusetts.gov produces some data every day. The two numbers I look at are ICU beds and hospitalizations, and they have been going down for about 2 weeks now. So
right,
that's
because those are
good.
legit. Again, I think we've mentioned this, but people say number of new cases is just a wild stat because it so depends on how many tests are done.
On testing, yeah. So
and people don't mention that.
Yeah.
I don't know if I said this on last week's podcast, or just said it to you, or didn't say it to you, but I've heard the stat before where they're like, it's amazing. All these Western, wealthier nations have a ton of cases, and these really dirt poor nations seem to have no cases. It's like, yeah, they have no tests. Do you know what I mean?
Right, yeah.
I mean, maybe some of them are warm weather and they legit don't, but also if you're a nation with no tests, you don't have confirmed cases.
You're not going to find too many cases if you don't test anybody.
So, but no one's even addressing that. They're like, only 9 cases in this country. And it's like, well, they don't have any testing.
It's so silly. Yeah.
Anyway, it goes on and on.
Yeah.
But we're good.
Yeah. I can't wait to get everybody back. I miss everybody. I realize there's a real powerful benefit of sort of social interaction with people, even on a very light-hearted way. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Miss that. And, did you watch the UFC
Yes,
event?
UFC is back. There's been 2 events already.
2 events.
So our last podcast, we made a lot of predictions.
We did.
So I'm not sure we want to go over it because they were pretty bad.
You think we were wrong on most of them?
I don't know about most of them.
I thought Tony Ferguson was going to be able to handle it.
We both predicted Tony Ferguson.
He got
Just
smashed.
great.
Oh my God.
Gaethje looked amazing.
He looked great. Yeah.
He
I
was
felt bad for
hammering.
him at the end.
Tony Ferguson,
Oof.
super tough guy. Unbelievable.
I think I read he broke his orbital bone.
Yeah.
That's a nasty
What
injury.
a beating that guy took.
Yeah.
Seemed superhuman. But, Gaethje just dominated him. I didn't see that happening at all.
Ngannou, first punch that landed, knocked the guy lights out. I think we kind of expected that.
Well,
right?
I think I went out on a limb and said Rosenstrike
Did you?
had such a
Okay.
good chin against
He did.
Overeem,
I
and
thought
he's
so, too.
technical, and then Ngannou
Yeah.
might get rattled, and he ran him over like a freight train.
He threw 4 punches. The first 3 whiffed, and then the 4th one put him asleep. Yeah.
Has anyone had power like that in MMA at all?
I don't think so.
I don't
yeah.
think so either. He just
Yeah.
has an extra pop on his hand. He just touches you.
Complete outlier.
That said, he's going to have to get better. Like even that, I mean, it sounds crazy to have a criticism of someone that ran someone over like a train, but like he did kind of just come in waiting, like sort of straightforward, swinging, throwing bombs, and like a really good boxer, I think. Like say he tried that against a high-level professional boxer, you can't fight that way, just coming in winging punches.
I have no idea, Dan. I don't know. These guys are so big and powerful. Doesn't what's his name do that? That boxer right now, the heavyweight that's pretty successful. He's got huge power. What's his name?
Yeah, but I don't think he comes straight forward winging
No.
punches like that. But
when he hits people,
yeah, they go to sleep.
yeah.
Yeah, what's his name? Who just fought
Yeah.
Tyson Fury? I mean, the guy who just
Yeah.
Deontay Wilder.
Deontay Wilder.
Yeah.
Yeah. He can punch. Poof. Well, the thing about the Tony Ferguson fight, Dan, last podcast, one of the topics we talked about was investing in a loss. And the idea was if you're losing in competition, if you can identify that you're losing, you have an opportunity to adjust strategy.
It's extremely difficult to do.
We mentioned that, right?
Yeah.
And Tony couldn't do it. What
Right.
did you think?
I think he's had so much success
Mm.
not changing strategies, right? I mean, fighting high level. He beat 12 high level guys in a row.
Right.
He's super tough, so I think he
Then I
just
was
thought
thinking of-
sooner or later Gaethje would wilt, and he just
Yeah.
didn't.
Well, I told you I watched the Barbosa fight. Barbosa was essentially winning that fight, and Ferguson just kept putting the pressure on the guy, and the guy ducked his head and shot in for a double, and Ferguson choked him with the Darce.
Right.
And what other fight? I think he was losing the Pettis fight in the beginning until he beat him down. And another fight I'm thinking about, he was sort of losing, and then he just breaks their concentration somehow with the pressure. But if you think about it, that's really not a great strategy to like be losing and getting hit a lot, but you
And
somehow
wait until the other guy.
breaks.
Yeah.
That's not a good long-term strategy, right?
Yeah.
And the other thing I think, I hate to be critical of any of these fighters because they're so good and they're such tough guys, but Tony has such a unique style. It's probably difficult to coach him, right? Because am I wrong? He seems a little self-coached, right? He's doing a lot of his own training, it seems like.
Yeah, you'd spot it better than me, but
yeah.
He's sort of very unorthodox, right?
But if you're not used to listening to a coach tell you what to do all the time, and then you're in the middle of the
And he's not from a
fight.
big camp, is he? Is he up with that?
I know he had Eddie Bravo in his corner.
Why can't I hear you suddenly from
I
that?
don't know.
Did John's microphone just turn off? Has that happened before?
I don't know.
I
Is that
hear you.
better?
Yeah.
Okay.
That was the first time that's happened.
Well, I had nothing of value to say at that moment, anyways.
It was about Ferguson's coaching.
Oh,
that
he's
not-
got Eddie Bravo was in his corner.
Oh, so that's it.
I don't know who his striking guys are, but he's a little unorthodox. I was thinking about that too, Dan, where especially kicking. I think when somebody sort of throws a kick with classic technique, I think there's a reason why this classic technique. It's probably really the most efficient way for your body to do it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And he kind of does his own version of kicking. So it's probably not as effective as learning how to do it the right way and then changing it up when you want. I don't know. What do you think?
It's an interesting. I've actually thought about that a bit, quite a bit. Not about Tony Ferguson, but these guys that are like I feel like it catches up to them. Like someone, when it's like there's a classic striking kickboxing or boxing style. And you have someone, I don't know if this is the best example because I haven't thought it through, like thought up an example ahead of time, but someone like Chuck Liddell, they're like, well, it seems like his hands aren't where they should be, and it seems like he's not doing a classic style, but he has such pop and he's so tough that he's putting guys to sleep and had an incredible run. I feel like eventually guys are like, or Rashad Evans or someone's like, I'm going to come in classic boxing style and I'm going to catch you. I know the counter argument would be Chuck just got old or, he lost his chin. But I feel sometimes that
why
it's
you
like,
lose your chin a little bit because you're getting hit.
Yeah,
more
like
than
there's
you
a
would.
reason that you're taught certain ways of boxing and kickboxing.
Yeah.
And if you're unorthodox, there's a reason that people think that's not good. That said, I mean, sometimes people do well. Was that sprinter Michael Johnson, I think? He ran like straight up and he looked like really awkward, but he was really fast. So it's like sometimes people can have a whole career doing things sort of not the right technique.
Yeah.
And still being successful. But I think mostly it's going to catch up to you. Mostly you have to focus on doing things the right way.
But if you have such a unique style, it probably makes it harder to coach somebody like that. You know what I mean? Because
it could be, they always say it's harder to train to fight someone like that too.
Yeah.
Because it's hard to replicate them in the gym.
Right. Tony also seemed like he didn't have, like he seems to be able to come in and move in a way that breaks the other guy's rhythm. You know what I mean? And like he changed his speed a little bit. He seemed to be operating at the same speed the whole time so that Gaethje could kind of really feel his rhythm and catch him with those left hooks.
Gaethje looked better than actually. Gaethje said a bunch of things I think that we've touched on on this podcast. That going into the fight, I just think he had a perfect mindset, right? Like, and it sounded legit. Like they'd talk about, maybe say pressure on Gaethje to win this, or would he get to face Connor if he won? Does he want the belt? And I think it was his coach that said something like, Justin doesn't really think at all about winning or losing. I don't remember if Justin himself said it or his coach. It was like he doesn't think about winning or losing. He just thinks about training. And it's sort of mirrored what we always talk about process. Go in, get better, improve. And they said that like almost paraphrased it, like he just doesn't think. And they said it like earnestly, like he just doesn't think about winning or losing. Like I'm sure he wants it, but it's like he just thinks about getting in and fighting, and he doesn't really think about the outcome ahead of time. And he also said something about, because Gaethje had, was it 2 losses?
Yeah.
And he said something about that too, that mirrors some things we talked about, where he said, I had to have those losses to improve. Like I had to lose to move forward.
Yeah.
And I think maybe it'll work this way for Tony Ferguson, where it's like you have that loss and you're like, all right, I have to do something. I have to. And Gaethje certainly looked better than ever. Maybe Tony Ferguson will be like, because if you win 12 times in a row, why would he ever consider doing anything different? It would be stupid, actually, right? It'd be like, I'm having so much success. Now maybe he loses and thinks, I can't take a beating like that again. And he improves,
Yeah.
So we'll see.
He's a little bit at a crossroads then, I think, right? You are right. The other thing, when you lose like that, I think the fighter loses a certain level of mystique they had going in. So it's like, oh, yeah, you can beat this guy down if you just stick with your game plan. So people are going to have more confidence fighting him now. So it's going to be harder, right? They're not going to break it maybe the way they did before. I don't know.
I can't wait to see either of these guys fight Connor. That'll be a really fun fight.
That'd be fun. Yeah.
They both want to fight Khabib for the belt. Might be less fun of a fight. Might be takedown. And then Khabib
do what he does, right?
Did you hear about Khabib's dad, too?
He was in a coma?
Yeah, he's been like very bad, I think, like 10 days.
Would he have a stroke or something?
Something like that.
Yeah.
And then it was like conflicting reports, like whether it was related to corona or not. At first they said no, and then they said yes. But anyway, it doesn't matter. He was in a coma for like a week, which is not good. No. And so the question is, if his dad doesn't pull out of this, will Khabib even fight again? Or will he just hang it up? Because he's made sounds about hanging it up already. I think he's getting a little tired of it.
Interesting.
So that would be weird if he's suddenly out of the picture. It's not it's not out of the realm of possibility that he just vanishes from the scene.
That'd be a bummer.
Yeah.
Huh.
So we picked. Did you see the other fights on Wednesday?
Yeah.
Anthony Smith is someone like.
Oh my God, he got clobbered.
Talk about a horrible. He like had his teeth punched out of his mouth.
Yeah, I was watching.
Maybe another broken orbital.
I was watching it with my son. Yeah, they said broken orbital and 2 teeth knocked out. It was surreal, Dan. Did you see it?
Yeah.
Oh yeah. He's in the turtle position. The guy's on Glover's on top of him, and he reaches out of the mat and he picks up one of his teeth and he goes to the ref. Here's one of my teeth. One of my teeth just came out. It was so weird. And I don't know what Glover's doing where this guy can have this conversation with the ref. Glover's like trying to get a wrist grab or something. Here's what we thought. In the 3rd round, when he went down from that initial uppercut that probably broke his orbital, I felt if Glover just put 5 or 6 more punches anywhere on him, they would have stopped it. But he kept doing 3 punches and stopping and looking for a choke. It was maddening.
I've seen that before.
Is Glover going to lose this fight now?
There's that's a common mistake, right? Where it's sort of like, even if someone's covering up, it's like, just keep hammering at the glove and they'll stop it.
They have to.
You know what I mean? Like, but people, like if they're covering up, they look to get past the glove and they stop punching. And it's like, you were literally like seconds away from winning the fight.
I felt that happen so many times in the 3rd, 4th, and 5th round till they finally stopped it.
I think Glover was just able to take Smith's punches better than Smith could take Glover's punches, because the first round or two, Smith was hammering Glover.
First round,
he was just Smith these straight rights, just smashing.
But Glover was sort of rolling with them a little bit. I think he did get a mouse under his eye, so he got hit with some shots, but he seemed like he was enduring it well, And then that one uppercut. Well, he hit him before that with some counter left hooks, like these short left hooks that were kind of surprising Smith, I think. I saw him look one time to get like, what the hell? Where did that come from? And then I think that might have made him pull his head down a little bit to defend the hooks. And then that rear right hook hit him right in the eye and broke his orbital. And that was it. That was the beginning of the end,
And getting your orbital broken and you're still in there getting hit in that same broken bone, and then you're spitting your teeth out. Like, you can't be in a good.
I'm usually not critical of the corners, but I don't know how they let him go out for the 5th round. That doesn't make any sense.
Again, a super, super tough guy, Anthony Smith. But and you know the story about the home invader with Anthony Smith.
That's kind of cool.
Yeah. So a crazed home invader of all houses breaks into Anthony Smith's house. And it actually sounds like really good luck. Like, if you see the video, the guy's screaming like a maniac.
I wonder what was wrong with the guy. Is he mentally ill?
I don't know.
Yeah.
Either mental illness or some
drug.
Angel dust, or some weird sort of drug that. But
the guy was arrested.
That's the thing. Anthony Smith was like, I had a surprisingly hard time with the guy. Like, he was like, I was just hammering him and beating him, and he just kept fighting. Like, so I guess the guy was like a reasonably high level wrestler, right? Like a college wrestler. Mm-hmm. So everyone always says, like, it's so strange from Anthony Smith's perspective to be like, why is this guy giving me such a hard time? But also from the other guy's perspective, is like, of all the houses to break into, he must be like, I can't believe someone's manhandling me. Like, and not that he was probably too crazed to be thinking of it, but he's probably used to being physically superior to whoever he runs into. But
interesting.
Imagine a maniac like that Anthony Smith is having trouble handling. It's just super good luck that that's the house he went into.
Yeah.
You know?
Any other person wouldn't have had a chance, it sounds like.
Or just shot the poor kid.
Oh, that too. Yeah. True.
But anyway, Anthony Smith, he's a funny one where I'm always like a technique guy, where I'm always like, I picked against Anthony Smith like 5 fights in a row that he won, because I was always like, I don't see the elite skill. Like, I don't see elite jiu-jitsu. I don't see elite wrestling.
He was kind of beating the guys who are already way past their prime. Like, he knocked out Shogun and Rashad, but it was like way past.
It's some of their last fights.
Yeah.
And so that's how I sort of felt. Like, whenever they're like, he's super tough, I'm like, so what? Like, that doesn't take you so far at the highest level. And he has like 12 losses or something like that.
He beat Gustafsson, so that's a big win.
Yeah. So that's why I kept picking wrong.
Uh-huh.
So then this time I'm like, all right, I forget it. I'm always wrong with this guy. I'm going to pick Anthony Smith. So
Well,
And
I think he was a 2-1 favorite. It was a
Yeah.
smart pick because Glover has looked a little slow. I mean, I think
Yeah.
he won 2 before this, maybe, but
he looked like
great.
he's slowing. He's 40 years old.
He looked pretty good though
Yeah.
for 40. Yeah.
And who was like that was Matt Brown. I did the same thing. They were like, he's so tough. And I'm like, well, so who cares if he's so tough? He's like, he doesn't have the skill, but then he'd win,
Yeah.
He won a lot of fights.
He won a lot of fights.
I had to wait. Like, I had to pick against him like 6 times in a row. And then when he loses on the 6th time, I'm like, see, I told you. I can announce to my wife or for someone who doesn't care at all. Like, see, I told you he was going to lose. And just no,
Very
she
funny.
probably doesn't remember that I was wrong 5 times in a row. I'm sure she doesn't remember because she's not paying any attention to what I'm saying anyway.
Awesome.
So fights are back. So that's
Fights
good.
are back,
They're back
yeah.
more on Saturday. I
More
don't
on
even
Saturday.
remember what they are, but we can't make picks because I don't remember the
Don't
fights.
remember. I think it's on ESPN.
We've already
Possibly?
kind of established that you don't want to bet a ton of money on our picks.
Definitely do not want to.
I think they were solid picks. I mean, it would be a little crazy to pick Gaethje over Tony, but
Some people did.
Yeah.
Yeah. UFC Yeah, what is it? What's coming? Okay. Overeem against Walt Harris.
oh, that's right.
That's a tough fight to pick. What do you think? Walt
I'm
Harris
going to
has
go
that.
against all my instincts and pick Walt Harris. Walt Harris, again, has this backstory where this super tragic, incredibly tragic recent event is in the last year. He had
Yeah.
a stepdaughter, was it? I don't want to get it wrong, but I think his stepdaughter just got snatched and
Crazy.
murdered. One
Awful.
of those random
Yeah.
awful events. Because I remember, I saw the word going out like this girl's missing and where is she and the alerts, and then unfortunately she was found. So you got to root for him at least.
Got to root for him.
Especially
Yeah.
Overeem's not that likable guy anyway. So
I kind of like him.
you like him?
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't like him.
I like all these guys, I guess. Yeah.
Overeem's off the steroids now, so
Yeah.
so that's not.
And
gonna help him.
Barbosa went down to featherweight, down to 145.
Barbosa's a guy again, a technique guy. So I always pick him. Who's he fighting?
This guy, Dan, his last name's spelled I-G-E.
Ige, yeah.
Ige?
I don't know. I think that's right. But, well, I'll pick Barbosa. I've seen the other guy fight. I don't even know if that's how you pronounce his name, but I don't remember him that clearly.
Huh. Be interesting.
He
to
must
see.
be on the up. I think Barbosa's getting into that stepping stone range of his career.
Well, if you're going to drop down 10 pounds, I mean,
Yeah.
and the guy was shredded at 55, so I don't know.
Yeah.
See how it works out for him. I have no idea.
Barbosa's great, but both Tony and Justin Gaethje both beat Barbosa, right? I think
Yeah.
in the last year
Yeah.
or so.
Yeah.
So that kind of puts you on the downward 2 losses in the last year or so.
Yeah.
Unless it's not the last year, I can't remember. I rem-
Recent enough. Yeah. Yeah. You know who I'd like to see fight, Dan? Ryan Hall.
Oh yeah,
He's good, right?
yeah. I think so for those who don't know, he's a pure jiu-jitsu guy. So he
But he
fights.
also does like karate style
Yeah,
striking.
very unorthodox, and he'll like roll at guys' ankles and just.
He's
kinda,
effective though. You're
Yeah.
right. Side kicks. And
Wasn't his,
Like-
but people don't want to fight him because they don't
No.
want. He's going to attack your knees and attack heel hooks and.
yeah.
And he tapped BJ Penn.
Yeah. Pretty
I mean,
handily.
I
Yeah.
thought the one thing he couldn't do against BJ would tap him. The one thing
Mm.
BJ had was his jiu-jitsu, but
different level.
tapped him pretty. Yeah.
BJ has that amazing fundamental jiu-jitsu, but these guys now have expanded so deep into these other areas of jiu-jitsu that they're on another level, obviously, My son and we purchased and we're watching some instructionals that Ryan Hall has for jiu-jitsu now for half guard and 50-50, things like this. And he's a super intense guy. I like it. He has very high standards. So he only sort of likes to teach things that you can do under all conditions, like where somebody could hit you. So he's still, Dan, going to heel hook you even though you're allowed to punch him in the face. You know what I mean? So,
Right, because if he locks it in.
well,
He'll end
it's
the
also
fight.
body positioning
Yeah.
and posture and things like this he does where you can't really hit him. You know what I mean? And very effective. But he had a quote that I heard him say today that I wanted to bring into the podcast where he said, "Jiu-jitsu is a sense, not a series of moves." So in other words, it's like, it's the very subjective thing. It's kind of like that cat energy stuff I was talking about a while ago, where, you get a sense of what you need to do and how you need to move is really important. Not just like grab right ankle with left hand, insert knee in here. You know what I mean?
Right.
That's not the level that you really need to be or want to be. You want to get that place where, they just have the sense of what's going on. So then they can improvise and they can just do so many different things. What do you think about that?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And that's also, I've talked with you about that, how as the sport evolved, there's so many new and different techniques and attacks. There's no way you could think your way through what is the counter to this. When he grabs me, this attack, I have to do steps A, B, and C. It's impossible. You better have a sense of what's happening and just a sense of something you've never seen before, but you have certain fundamentals, certain feeling, and you go, he seems to be isolating my arm, or he seems to be, whatever it is, you better have some sense and get yourself
There was
out
a
of
nice leg lock finish against Michael Johnson. Did you see that one?
Yeah.
Wednesday. It's a Brazilian guy? Forget his name now. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. But
Michael Johnson's so good, and he's one of those guys that finds a way to lose a lot. He's like a 500 record. It's unbelievable. He's beaten Tony Ferguson. He's beaten Dustin Poirier. He's beaten like really, really good guys.
Boxing is very good.
And and so he almost beat Gaethje. Like he had a tough fight, although he lost. So he was at that level. Like that's the highest level.
He's pretty much right there.
And his record's like 13-12 or like something like that's completely.
It's not like he's making gross mistakes really either. It's just one of those things. Like this guy, he dominated the guy the first round. The guy, my son Rory told me, the guy's stats for the fight were he threw 16 strikes and landed 3. And that all happened in the first round. And so it's something like the second worst percentage of strikes landed in the history of the UFC or something like that. But then he shot in.
And he changed his strategy.
Changed his strategy, Dan.
He said, this isn't working. I'm 3 for 16.
He did a really nice leg attack. And what I liked about it, Dan, is he kept the overhook on the ankle. He didn't switch to a heel hook, but then he reaped the knee and laced his leg inside the other leg. So you're like wrenching everything. You're wrenching the knee and the ankle, even the hip. And the guy, it's hard to get out because like sometimes if somebody's heel hooking, the heel might slip out. So you don't have any of that happening. And it looked like Michael Johnson was a little unfamiliar with the attack. So he didn't really do what he needed to do properly,
Yeah.
But it's so cool. It's great to see jiu-jitsu win in the UFC, right?
Yeah.
Because if you can make it work there, I mean, you can make it work anywhere. It's pretty badass.
Speaking of which, although this is a very low level, did you see that old video? It's been around forever. Ryan Hall fighting in the diner against some drunk.
Oh, yeah.
Remember that? That was Ryan Hall.
It was Ryan
I
Hall.
saw the video before I knew who Ryan Hall was.
Oh, really?
That's how old the video was, yeah. It was before he was on The Ultimate Fighter or any of that. So
I purchased an instructional from Ryan Hall. It has to be more than 15 years ago. I think it was.
Oh, so it
VHS
wasn't
tape,
before that.
And it was a manual, yeah.
But that's a fun Google search for anyone's out there. It's just, he's a
What
really
did he
good,
do? Just mount the guy and
really
just
good
scold him
person.
or
Some
something?
drunk kept.
Or did he choke him?
He ended up choking him out. But first he just took him down and mounted him, and he was so calm and so like, I don't want to hurt him and I don't want to do anything. And then the guy just kept at it and kept at it and kept at it until they put him to sleep. But Ryan Hall, I thought he came across really well.
Oh, yeah.
In the video. Like he was very much avoiding the fight. He was not, butting heads with the guy. He wasn't trying to be tough or, he was
He wasn't
much more
trying to
patient than
teach
I'd
him a
be or
lesson
than
or
most people
something.
would be.
Yeah.
Especially when the guy's no threat to you. It must be tempting.
Well, he comes across as a very serious martial artist, so
Yeah.
I have a lot of respect for that, the way he carries himself.
Yeah, I'm a fan.
Yeah. And we're like in this instructional, Dan, it's like some of it's on the deep half, and this jiu-jitsu for me, it seems like it just keeps going deeper and deeper.
Right.
Like once you think you have a handle on everything, it just goes deeper. It's crazy.
One more thing. Ryan Hall has Tourette Syndrome too, right?
Oh, he blinks a lot. Is that what it is?
Yeah. Like the stereotype of Tourette's is yelling curses and that kind of stuff, like the flashier, like unwanted curses and insults and this
Right.
kind of stuff. But I think the more common actual way it manifests is like Ryan Hall, like he has like ticks and blinks and this kind of stuff. And I'm pretty sure it's Tourette's.
Oh, that's interesting. I didn't know that. I knew he did blink a lot, but that makes total sense. So the other thing I did, Dan, was I read another chapter from The Fighter's Mind. I sat out in the yard yesterday, beautiful day.
So you flat recommend this book now?
I got it, man. Dan, I've got like every third page is dog-eared, scribbled on. So
nice. And we discussed there's The Fighter's Heart by the same author that
was the
not
first
recommend
book.
as much.
You read that one?
Yes.
You don't think it's as good?
I did. I read it a long time ago, but I don't remember it being as interesting. I think it's from like the old days of MMA that barely applies to anything now. Like sort of
superfan John Burke
fights.
said the exact same thing to me. He said he didn't think the other one was as good.
Yeah.
And he's reading this now as well. So I got to the Randy Couture chapter, which sometimes you get to these chapters, you think, I must know everything there is to know about Randy Couture. How could this chapter be interesting for me at all? But it still ended up being kind of cool, kind of interesting, So some of the things he talked about is, one thing was being an underdog is freedom. So you talk about Michael Johnson's record. Randy Couture had a record like that. Wasn't he like 19-8 or something?
Yeah. BJ Penn too. Yeah.
But especially Randy Couture, I don't think like BJ, I think his legacy took a little bit of hit recently, right?
Yeah. Well, you're right. It's different because BJ lost like 8 in a row at the end of his career, and that made that record look like that.
Right.
Whereas Randy, he came in like UFC 13 or something, way back when, and was really good.
I think he fought like Vitor in his second fight for the heavyweight championship. Yeah. So, but something about the way he carried himself and the way he picked his challenges, that he often was the underdog. So then, even if you don't win, it doesn't hurt your esteem that much. People still think and the way he carried himself, I think people liked him a lot. This was pre-Conor McGregor days, so, he was a pretty humble pie guy, as I remember, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. And then we talk about that, like being an underdog is freedom is sort of the flip side of the ego trap, where you're feeling overvalued by people. He would put himself in a position or undertake challenges. So I think he was originally the heavyweight champ, and then he went down to fight Chuck Liddell at light heavy because Chuck looked like he was an unstoppable monster. So then people are like, oh, wow, Randy's going to get killed. But that's, he was sort of the underdog. So he wasn't in an ego trap.
All his biggest wins he was basically the underdog, right?
He retired and then came out to fight Tim Sylvia.
Yeah.
And so it's a no lose proposition for him.
Brock Lesnar.
Yep. He lost that fight, but he acquitted himself well.
But it's another example.
Yeah.
Did Randy say he was actively seeking out situations that he'd be the underdog, or is that just looking at his career?
I don't know if he specifically said that, but he did. He was choosing his challenges correctly. Like take the Tim Sylvia fight. I think he trained with him enough, and they were kind of buddies. So he probably had some insight that, I actually have a decent shot at beating this guy. And it's going to seem to everyone else that I have no chance at all. Yeah. So why don't I do this and take this challenge? And then you're excited about it. You're motivated. You're going to put in a great training camp for it. And then you have your ideas that you're going to try. If it doesn't work, it doesn't work. You know what I mean? So I think he just was intuitively clever about picking his challenges that way. Well, he had some bitter defeats in wrestling. He never, I think, made it on the Olympic team. Like, he would lose in the trials all the time. So he was, like, very frustrated at that. Even though he was, like, one of the favorites to make the team, he would lose it in the wrestle-off, so to speak, or the trial tournaments to get there. So maybe he learned from that. Like, why do I have to be the overdog all the time? Maybe I'll go in as an underdog. Clever, right?
Yeah.
He had this other concept where I thought this was interesting, Dan. Sometimes you can get called for stalling in wrestling, or passivity, I guess they call it, and then your opponent gets to decide whether he wants to have you down in the bottom of the wrestling position or not. So he had an identity of himself as never being passive, always attacking. But every once in a while, a referee would call for passivity. And in the past, that would piss him off. He's like, how dare you call me for passivity? And he would kind of lose his focus a little bit and maybe lose the match. So then he flipped it. He said, now when they call me for passivity and I have to go to the bottom position, I'm going to use it to break the other guy's will because I'm not going to let them score any points on me. And even though they're screwing me, it's a chance to stick it to the other guy. You know what I mean? A chance to, he said he would break their will because they couldn't score any points on him. And like, so even though they got the break, they couldn't make anything out of the opportunity, and he would get a psychological edge from that. What do you think about that?
Well, let me ask you a question. Do you think that's like a subset of this idea of finding ways to, it's finding motivation, but more specifically like finding ways to get pissed off, like to feel like you've been wronged in some way?
Well,
do you know what I mean?
Well,
like,
Dan, he was actually, the way he described it was he was doing the opposite. Like in the past, he would get pissed off and to the point where it would cause him to be distracted and not perform at his best. This time he looked at it as like, yes, now I have an opportunity to stick it to this other guy. So I don't think it's really anger. It's viewing it differently.
Because I was thinking that, I mean, I've seen that, we've probably even talked about so many of these competitors find a way to be pissed off.
Right.
And I'm thinking, so right now, a lot of people out there probably watching the Michael Jordan documentary.
Yeah.
The Last Dance.
Yeah.
And Jordan would constantly be pissed off at like opponents. You know,
so here's Dan. I don't think it's being pissed off. I'm going to make a distinction.
Okay.
I think it's being insulted. And like, this guy doesn't think I'm freaking good enough. So what that is doing is that's keeping you out of the ego trap. Because the ego trap is when people think they're valuing you higher than you think they should. You're flipping that on its head, and like they're imagining that the guy is denigrating them.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Because I was thinking the last episode of Michael, every one of these big games or big series that he was in, like he'd say like someone would walk, like one of the opposing coaches walked past and didn't, like the night before the game, like in the restaurant, like walked past and didn't say anything to him, like walked right past him, and he was like, I went off the next game because I felt like, like disrespected.
Yeah.
And I'm sure in retrospect, the other coach was like, I
didn't want to bother you, and I did her.
Yeah. But and then anytime.
But don't they do that in the NFL all the time? That's why the Patriots have those sanitized press conferences where they don't say anything
Belichick's
negative.
strategy, right?
Yeah.
Like that. Because they said the chalkboard, it seems to work, right? Like
bulletin board fodder. Yeah.
So
it's the same thing. It's all about
being
slighted, disrespected, keeping yourself out of the ego trap that way.
And I'd see it again when I knew Kenny Florian preparing for these fights. He'd usually find a way to get really irritated. Kenny's really, I think, by nature, nice guy and sort of gets along with most of his opponents, virtually all his opponents. But he'd find a way to be irritated about something disrespected about something they said. And because you can always find something, because if they're interviewing someone before a fight, the other person's generally going to say something about how they think they're going to beat you, some sort of weakness or some way that they're superior. So you can always sort of hear that and feel disrespected, feel like they just said they're better than me.
Interesting.
And then you come in feeling like you want to prove them wrong.
That's what I do. I come in here trying to prove Dimitri wrong every time we do one of these podcasts.
He's inspiring us with his negativity, with his disrespect. Exactly.
Just kidding, of course. Yeah, very cool. Very cool. But he, to get back to Couture, he's doing something slightly different. But
this is it's an offshoot of it.
And this is what we used to do. I came up with this term. I think I talked about this. Jocko has a term that I think he just says good. And we used to I came up with a term years ago that is even better. So you find out like the ref screws you over or something. They didn't give you the right size gloves or something happens. We'd say even better. So the victory would be even sweeter because we have to overcome more now.
You're spitting out teeth.
Yeah, even better.
Like even better.
Not so much. This is more before the contest starts. Yeah. Okay. Oh, here's another thing I liked about Randy. Do you know the title of his autobiography?
The natural.
Becoming the natural.
Yeah, well, I got
Very good. Yeah, they call him Randy the Natural.
Yeah.
But you know what? I really liked the word becoming. And that's, I think he talks about that, and we talk about it here a lot, about emphasis on the process and the future you, not who you are now, where you're afraid to lose what you have. It's like you're becoming something else. You know, he became a more complete fighter and, you know, trained boxing and so forth. So I think that's just a great thing to emphasize, the becoming. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, in jiu-jitsu, you've said it a million different times in ways, right?
I try to do it. Yeah, even now in training, it's like, I want to be worried about my future self, not my current self, and so I can lose today because it's going to help my future self get better. Oh, then he talks about, so Randy Couture lost, as I said, in Olympic trials, and I think that fired him up when he went into MMA to beat Vitor among some other people. But it was just one of those situations where he had a loss, and it inspired him to train
harder. Was he an underdog when he fought Vitor?
Oh, huge like underdog.
He was, right?
Huge underdog.
Going back a ways now. But that's
Vitor was just blowing people out of the cage.
Yeah. I remember watching Vitor's first fight when he used to do the storm, like he'd storm across the cage throwing punches.
Blast.
And just
straight blast.
Yeah, straight blast, I guess, and just blast people against and just overwhelm them.
He did it to Vanderlei, remember that?
Yeah, did it to Vanderlei Silva.
Yeah.
I believe he did it to Tank Abbott.
Yeah.
Who was a super monstrous guy at the time.
Yeah.
And it was like, who is this
terrifying
kid?
Guy, and he just blasted him, right?
And I think his very first fight was a different guy than either of those.
Did you ever see him when he fought that giant guy? This guy had his own martial art. It was called like SAFTA or something. And he was just big goon. Oh my God. The guy was like 6'8", 300 pounds. And I think Vitor fought him during one of those tournament times, because that guy fought some like small, stocky bar owner before that.
Was it Paul Verhoeven's, the polar bear?
He was that size, but
it wasn't him.
It wasn't him. And he I think he might have thumbed the guy in the eye, and then he would do this thing where he would just jump on him with both knees. So you'd have like this 350-pound guy jump down on top of you, both knees into your ribs. You know, he was just crazy. And he had a hat. I think it was SAFTA. You don't remember that?
That sounds.
And then I think Vitor fought the guy and just demolished him. I think he did a classic sort of clinch and trip like the Gracies would do, you know what I mean? Outside trip. And then he went to knee on stomach and just pop, 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 like a machine gun of punches until the guy went unconscious. And then I think the guy retired from MMA, I think, after that. But the guy seemed like kind of a prick, you know?
So Vitor was this unstoppable force at the time. So just another example of Couture being an underdog. I never put it together that he always seemed like one of the top guys from when he first entered the UFC. So I sort of never had the vision that he was always fighting as the underdog. But I think that helped him with his Captain America image at the time. Like Captain America coming and beating up someone that's weaker is not really the image. Right?
Right.
It's like the image is coming to face odds that are against
overwhelming
you.
Odds, yeah. So I guess his losses in the Olympic trials motivated him to be a better MMA fighter. When I started wrestling in high school, Dan, as a sophomore, I went out for the wrestling team, and we had, I think, a Christmas tournament. So I had like a month of wrestling practice underneath me, no other experience. I went out there, and some kid who had been wrestling for who knows how long just dominated me. It was so annoying. I don't even think they had tech fall back then, so I think he was winning by like 20-0, and then with 10 seconds left, he pinned me. It was like the worst of all.
So dominated you and then pinned you.
Pinned me, but I didn't defecate myself in the middle of the mat.
So there's that.
So
that's a
it
plus.
wasn't quite the worst case scenario, but it was really close. It was bad as it gets. You know
Didn't
what I mean?
cry, or did you cry?
I did cry.
Okay.
I was just
so there's
disgusted.
two good things.
I really wasn't even sad.
Yeah.
I was just disgusted with the whole situation and annoyed. So then 2 years later, senior captain of the wrestling team, guess who I meet up against? Mr. 10 seconds left.
This sounds a little bit like a movie. This happened?
It happened.
I never heard this
and
story.
I was fired up, and I pinned him like in a minute or something like that. Yeah. Got my revenge. I didn't score 20 points on him,
But you
I pinned him, though. Yeah. He was good, too.
And again, there's people that could get that first beating and walk off the mat, right? I'm sure it happens.
Yeah.
It happens in your academy.
Yeah. It does.
You know,
yeah.
people get demolished and they're like, that's it for me.
That's it. Yeah. I'm out. Check, please. That's bad, too. When you're losing 20-0 and then you're like, oh, at least I'll get out of here without getting pinned. Nope. Pin. God damn it.
But also it's a bad feeling when you're like, I can't do anything, right? You're like, he's too good.
Doesn't feel good. Yeah. Yeah.
Not as bad, I think, as
well, I'll tell you, I
boxing
didn't
when
stop trying. I was trying the whole time. To no avail. Yeah.
That's a certain kind of thing you have to overcome in the sport too. Like we've talked about it before, when you're like, you don't actually probably face this, but for most of us out there, you'll be like trying to pass someone's guard, and inside your brain starts going, "There's no way you can't pass it." Or like someone's on you, and you're like, "You can't get him off. Like you'll never get out of here."
And then it's a self-fulfilling prophecy, unfortunately, right?
Exactly. Something you have to try to take that deep breath and go, "Let's go." Like,
yeah.
Let's try.
Speaking of which, Randy Couture talked about when he was wrestling, they had these, occasionally they would do a 90-minute sparring session of wrestling. No water, no stopping. And he had to go straight through for 90 minutes. And sometimes he'd be paired up with Roland Gardner. Remember that guy?
Yeah.
He won the gold medal at heavyweight, or super heavyweight, whatever the hell it was.
Similar build to Polar Bear Verolance.
But yeah, a little shorter maybe, but
Roland Gardner, he actually fought a couple, maybe one MMA
fought
fight.
one MMA fight.
And it was against someone pretty good, that Japanese judo guy.
Yeah.
And he won.
Yeah.
But I think he was like, it's not for me. He was just like, I don't like getting punched. I don't like punching people.
Yeah. I think you're right.
He was out.
He ended up dying, didn't he?
Roland Gardner?
Yeah. I thought he died for something.
He might have. That sounds familiar.
Yeah.
But he had the big win over Carolyn, right?
Yeah.
Like that was the unstoppable.
That's the only guy to beat him, I think.
Ivan Drago, like Russian wrestler.
Yeah.
And never lost, I don't think. And Roland Gardner beat him.
Yeah. So Randy would have to go. He goes, yeah, I would.
He's much bigger than Randy.
Yeah. Randy said he wouldn't score a point on him for 90 minutes. He'd just get ragdoll. He goes, but I kept trying. But he said some guys would break. So some guys would start crying. Yeah. They'd like sit down and start crying. Or they would just lose it, and they would break mentally. What do you think about that?
Oh, I could see it. I mean,
yeah.
You have to. I think I heard a story about Daniel Cormier breaking down in some when
in practice or something.
Yeah, there was some guy that came in as a heel that used to wrestle with Daniel Cormier.
Oh yeah, Pat somebody.
Yeah. I think he's gone now. Like he had sort of a mid-level career.
Yeah.
But he came in as like the foe to Daniel Cormier.
Yeah.
And he was telling the story about Cormier breaking down and crying.
Yeah.
In a session. And I don't think Cormier denied it.
I think you're correct, Dan.
It happens, right? Like,
well, that's another interesting point.
Cormier's a great wrestler.
Because from my, toxic masculinity point of view, I was thinking, if you break down and cry, you're over. You're done. You might as well never come back. But the truth is, maybe you're just a little bit more emotional, and more emotional variability than somebody else. So you cry a little bit.
Cormier could do it. I mean, I'm not a crier myself. I don't imagine you are. So I don't think any scenario would have me. But also, I mean, I guess it's not like they're like weeping from losing. I think it's frustration, right? Like they
must have been frustration.
They just can't. They're super competitive, and they're trying and trying and trying. They can't. The practice is going badly.
Right. So it's more a sign of their innate competitiveness,
I would guess,
than any kind of weakness per se. Yeah.
That's what I would assume.
Yeah. Interesting.
And then there's people who break down because of weakness too, but probably less in the Olympic wrestling room though.
What do you think the equivalent in podcasting would be for a 90-minute session in the water?
I'm on the verge right now of breaking down crying. I wasn't going to bring it up. But
maybe we should come in here.
It's pretty warm.
It's
pretty warm in here. I don't want to. I don't want to try to talk us up as like soldiering through, but it is pretty warm in here. And we
think
have
you're
been
right.
going. We go nonstop now, almost an hour.
I think we better stop before you start crying.
I'm on the verge.
Definitely.
But I think people would, if I cry in here, it's because of my competitive nature. I don't want to, it's not weakness. It's that
you just want it so bad.
it's that, yeah, I want it so bad. And the podcast is not going the way I wanted it to.
What I was going to say is Rogan does 3-hour podcasts sometimes. Maybe we should try to do like a 4-hour one. Trump, Rogan. And
Yeah.
one of us would
Screw you,
definitely
Rogan.
break down and cry after 4 hours.
Yeah, I don't think.
Oh, speaking of
but
which,
he has
speaking
guests
of
yeah.
records, so as you do know, I had the record for backwards shoulder rolls with no momentum at 102.
Right.
John Burke started us off in the 60s, I think, and I got up to 102. Then I get a nasty little text from our friend Tin, as in the metal, Nguyen, and he said, "Yeah, I broke your record. I did it 110. Ha ha ha." And then
I believe him too.
well, I have this message for Tin. Rory immediately did 112. So Tin had the record for less than 24 hours.
So how hard is it to do 112 of these things? I know
it depends,
it hasn't
Dan.
been that hard when I do like 4. I'll say, I don't mean to brag, but I've done like 4 to 6 in a row.
I think if you understand your body and you stay relaxed, it's totally doable. But you know, it's a thing where you're curling your pelvis up and you're reaching your legs over your head. So it takes a little bit of awareness to have the right efficiency to do it.
And
if you're efficient, it's still a little bit of a workout. Like my core felt like pretty.
And any of
pumped
these
up.
things where you do 100, I can see it like, you know, it's like even push-ups, right? You can be at 20, at 25 going, I feel pretty good. And then like at 40, you're like, oh, wait.
I'm done.
Like it all of a sudden like catches up fast.
Yeah.
So I could picture it with that where you're like at 50, like, oh, this is not actually that hard. But then at 70, you're like, wait a minute, you know, like,
Yeah.
because once it goes, right? Like it.
But so Tin, Rory just threw the gauntlet down, shattered your record. You had it for
So,
a very
but also
short
if
time.
everyone's beating it by 2, it must be hard, right? Because why isn't I picture Rory being like, I just did 140, you know, but it must be kind of hurting. Otherwise,
Honestly,
you
I
just
think
keep-
he might have got bored. I don't know.
Oh, yeah. That's the other thing. It could be a mental aspect where you're like, I'm a little tired of.
I think it might take like a good 10 minutes to do that many.
Yeah. And you could just break down crying.
That's right.
At about 100, I could see.
That's it. All right, Dan. Another great podcast. I can't wait for this lockdown to be over.
We're soldiering through
Yeah.
this whole quarantine, pumping out podcasts.
That's it. And everyone stay strong out there. Thank you so much for your support. I can't wait to see you all again. Please share this. Please subscribe to our YouTube channel if you haven't done that yet. And we'll see you next week.